All right, we are on the air, and it is after 4, so we will go ahead and we're going to go ahead and get started. And we got a few items on the agenda today, 4 of them, and I want to thank all of you for being here, everybody watching at home for the Community Planning and Transportation Committee meeting for Thursday, October 27th, 2022. And we've got, go ahead and get our first item kicked off here, which is the Public Transit Ridership Report, which we go over every month in this committee. So once again, anybody listening at home, if public transit is of interest to you, I definitely encourage you to tune in to the committee or attend if you'd like. And we go through a full update of our transit ridership data, our future plans, our route adjustments, all those types of things. So definitely encourage everybody to attend or watch at home for this item. And so we have staff here to give us a presentation for this month.
Thank you, Chair, and welcome to Public Works Day at CP&T. I'll try to be brief so my colleagues can get up here and move on with their presentations. But yeah, a few updates I'm going to hit in the staff report, and then I'll talk real briefly over the ridership numbers for September. Just under the Go Norman Transit Plan update, or the work we've been doing, we're about to start the public comment period for the final public comment period before we go to you guys and ask for your final approval on the route changes. So we should have a press release going out tomorrow, posters on the buses over the next couple of days, a legal notice in the paper on Sunday, and then a website that will go live tomorrow with the press release so people can access all the information. We'll also have some public meetings, of course, the week of the November 15th. So we'll have one on the 15th, 16th, 17th. And there'll be more details about those on the website and in those posters too. So we'll take public comments through the 21st, and then we'll compile all those and circle back to you guys in early December and let you know what we heard and seek your feedback and approval or not on moving forward with implementation more so than we've done to this point. So really on the edge of seeing some major route changes in Norman if we make it through the public comment period and get your approval. So we'll be going through that this month or this upcoming month. For grants, working with other staff here at the city, we did submit another STBG UZA project to ACOG to replace 2 buses. Council supported that with the programming resolution earlier this month, so we're happy to do that and keep hopefully accumulating funds outside of the local dollars to be able to replace our aged transit fleet. We already have quite a bit in the queue, and that's what I'll skip down to next. Our 2 battery electric buses were the first 2 purchases we made as a transit system here at the city, and the report says October. Unfortunately, we're still dealing with some supply chain issues, so they're going to probably be here before Christmas, so maybe an early Christmas present. We'll go through some quality assurance and make sure they're roadworthy and we know what to do with them, and we're kind of eyeing maybe early January. We may have a little bit of a ribbon cutting or something. Might be fun, our first 2 electric vehicles for the city, and then hopefully get those on the road in early January as well. So there's literally 1-2 parts that are missing, but they won't operate without those 1 or 2 parts, right? So we're anxiously awaiting those. And then just quickly, we also have 5 paratransit vehicles on order, and then 5 more CNG 35-foot fixed route buses on orders for a total of 12 of the 28. So about a little over a third of the fleet will be replaced in hopefully the next year. And then skipping to the performance report for the ridership. Fiscal year-to-date ridership on the whole system is just shy of 70,000, which is almost 5% increase over year-to-date last year, so the first quarter. And for fixed route specifically, I like to look at the average fixed route daily ridership number. It's really more telling than the total. We had 876 per day ridership in this past September, and then in September 2021 we had 863. It's just a 1.5% increase, but still an increase. Like I've been saying, we're now starting to compare more robust ridership numbers than with COVID months, so we're not going to see a lot of gain. We also had we have to deal with football game days and things like that. So that kind of drives down on Saturdays. And then for Plus, we're still seeing major gains on paratransit ridership. 82 average daily for this September, and then 68 for last September, about a 21% increase. So people are still getting out and about, and we're still meeting the demand and getting people where they need to go. So happy to answer any more questions. There's obviously more detail in here than I went over specifically, but like I said, I wanted to be brief because I know you guys got a full agenda. So.
Any questions from you guys?
I'm just glad to see if there's an increase continuously.
Yeah. It seems every month we've been seeing positive ridership numbers. We've seen, 70,000 just this fiscal year, right?
Mm-hmm.
70,000 car trips that aren't being taken, which I think is a pretty good deal.
Yeah.
People think about car or traffic congestion in Norman, and it's always been an issue folks complain about. So that's 70,000 less people that were driving individual cars on the streets of Norman during that time period. So, Councilmember Grant?
I was just curious, what do you think is kind of driving the increase? Is it just like the routes or more established? Yeah. What do you think might be driving it?
I think we're still seeing increase over, we're still not at the same place we were pre-pandemic levels, so there still is some of that gaining, we're getting there. But honestly, hopefully we see a 1%, 2%, 3% increase all the time. That's the goal, is to get more people, as Councilmember Holman says, off the road, or off their personal vehicles in the bus, and get them where they need to go. So just more people getting out and about. It's such a small increase this month that it's probably too small to really go into detail about, but we're really trying to really gain back up to the pre-pandemic levels still. So
Yeah, even the West Norman route has a 51% increase,
right,
which is by far our lowest route. Like I said, I think that's the route people see when they think that nobody rides the bus. They see that one over there. And so I would encourage people to ride the Lindsay East route sometime if you think nobody rides the bus, because you'll probably be standing up on that one. So, okay, well, I appreciate it. Anything else? Okay.
Appreciate you.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Taylor. Your agenda put back up. All right, our item number 2 on the agenda today is a presentation from a representative of the Bicycle Advisory Committee regarding their review of protected bike lanes, an item that we've requested some time ago. As we've installed more bike lanes, miles of bike lanes in Norman over the last few years, last decade or so, and as we have developed plans for several more miles of bike lanes in Norman, this is an issue that's come up from folks. And I've seen some other cities, like Oklahoma City has installed a lot of bike lanes, and they've done some creative ways to help protect cyclists from cars and things like that. So I thought it'd be a good idea for us to talk about this. So I'm excited to have a presentation here today and have you here today with us as well.
We're going to tag team.
Okay.
David Riesling, your transportation engineer. Hal Cantwell, the chair of the BAC. We'll get it started. I'll get it started and then hand over to Hal. So this topic originally evolved, I think, from two different reasons. One, we had the project on 12th Avenue Southeast between Highway 9 and Cedar Lane that introduced some crossing situations for vehicular traffic and bike traffic that had not really existed in Norman to that time, at least not to that extent. That brought up bicycle safety, but then the popularity of protected bike lanes was growing. Oklahoma City was putting in a fair share. I think there were some trips. Was it Colorado Springs that you went to?
I've been to Denver and Boulder and seen some there.
And saw some of that there. So
I think it's Walker Avenue in OKC.
Right.
That I've recently noticed locally.
Right. So it's gaining in popularity in the area. So it's only natural that Norman would consider something like that as well. So in September of 2020, formally this committee asked the Bicycle Advisory Committee to look into the protected versus unprotected bicycle lanes, and we realized that we kind of had a mixed bag of what we were doing. There was also an issue with the 24th Avenue East bike lane that kind of surfaced at that same time where the plans called for the green bike lanes. Green bike lanes were really caught up in supply chain issues. We couldn't even find the epoxy that you use to apply the green material. So it's like, okay, we've got to do something now. We came up with a solution for 24th East where we doubled up on the bike symbols, and that's an option moving forward. That's one of the things that the Bicycle Advisory Committee looked at. We provided you an update in September of last year. That wasn't much of an update because COVID was in the way of that, and we had a lot of meetings canceled, didn't have quorums and things like that. So finally got some work done. Ironically, it was when I was not able to attend meetings because of my injury. So what we'll talk about tonight, some of the research methodology that we undertook, the types of the protected bike lanes that we considered, but we also looked at unprotected bike lanes that might just be with signs or that might have signing and markings, things like that. We have a bike plan that's part of the comprehensive transportation plan that we go by. The bike committee came up with an updated map for that as well. So that's two things that we looked at. How? I got to you quickly.
You did.
So it's, you
First
want me
of
to
all,
advance?
First of all, just thanks for letting, kind of being involved in both trying to make Norman both a more appealing place, but a lot safer place to cycle. We'll do decades of cycling experience in Norman, so I've seen it evolve through many different levels. What we tried to do was do kind of a broad information gathering. A lot of us on the Bicycle Advisory Committee, not only are we riders, we're pretty involved in other groups, other subgroups around both the state and the region. So had good access, good resources for information, examples. We would go we'd explore Oklahoma City. If we were in other cities, we'd go look around, things like that. So tried to get an overall feel for what kinds of bike lanes and how they're being used out there, but also with the concept of scaling it to Norman. I mean, when you're Milwaukee, when you're Denver, you can think, or when you're Oklahoma City, you can kind of think a little bit differently. So that's where this progressed from, sadly, 2 years ago when we were excited about it, but then just kind of struggled along. And I'm not feeling like need to read everything. People can go over this kind of, but some of the backstory is the two major types. Norman has a limited, probably the most common are, first of all, the green lanes, and then as David alluded to, the issues with the green lanes. So now it is just separate designated lanes with those signing, striping, and signing being both vertical and on the roadway. Have gotten a lot of positive feedback from the riding and community, just in general around Norman, for that. The signage or the barriers, the flexible barriers in Oklahoma City do provide and are a really good example of a protected lane, but not a highly involved or technical input as far as construction or maintenance or things like that. Oklahoma City still does have maintenance. Those barriers, they get whacked, they get taken out. So there is an ongoing issue with both maintenance and interaction with both cyclists and vehicular traffic.
Yeah, those are definitely the type that I had in mind initially for
Right.
the 12th Avenue.
And that
Highway
was,
9.
and there are, well, we'll just continue.
I was just going to say some of the stories that they relayed to us in a workshop that Hal and I both attended were that when those are hit, the epoxy they're used to apply to the pavement is strong enough that when they're hit, they pull up chunks of the pavement with it. So it's, they've dealt with that issue numerous times.
That's not cheap.
So,
Yeah, are you done there?
yeah. So both flexible, non-flexible. And And I'll go over here in just a little bit. We have some examples of bike lanes around. Probably what we would like to focus on is basically best fit scenario for the lanes, not designate a certain kind for, broadly across the city. Try to tailor them for the ridership, the interaction, be it vehicular or pedestrian, the ways that people are using the lanes, things like that. Probably the most versatile and adaptive way, not only physical, but also budget-wise. Because some of these things can get really tough to not only install, but also maintain. So we tried to take all that into account. The green lane was probably one of the most obvious. The maintenance was difficult because of the keeping it clean. That was something, we had a lot of feedback. Initially, the cyclist community was like, we like these. And then within about a month, we're like, we won't ride in them.
Yeah.
Because they tended together, they were difficult to clean, needed additional equipment, things like that. So we kept all that in mind as we kind of went through these recommendations and evaluations. Sure. Kind of jumped ahead on this one. It would be, we've also worked with Norman PD to get accident reports, kinds of accidents, where things happen, be they cyclist's fault, of cars, drivers' fault, if you want to assign types, things like that. Where those things happen, when they happen. So that's the other thing that is kind of important, is to, sometimes different lanes function differently at different times of the day. So you kind of had to take that into account. So we did work with some really good data that the police department was able to supply, and also meld that into some of our recommendations and evaluations.
Councilor Peacock?
Just real quick before you
Sure.
move on. Does the green paint give you any kind of nighttime assistance? Does it help identify the lane a little bit better at night, or?
Not really.
Not really.
The striping's probably, it was, and David could relate to this, for a number of years, and kind of as the studies were going on in other cities, it kind of became the standard for most obvious designated lane. I mean, it's, if you're not gonna have barriers, or if you're not gonna have protected, it's the most visually noticeable. I will, as a cyclist, also throw one negative. We have a lot of feedback. If the lane's dirty, if there's trash in the lane, if we pull outside the lane, we get yelled at, we get impinged upon, people trying to make points. It's like, there's an impression that a cyclist has to be in the lane if there is a lane.
Right.
So the green lanes kind of emphasize that. So
Appreciate that.
that kind of experience in, go ahead. Around Norman, numerous kinds. From just the neighborhoods, everybody's seen these. Some of the bike route signage, I know, in Norman has been in place since 1975, because I designated some of those routes when I was interning for the Department of Transportation, or Department of Parks, long ago. So there's a little bit of the backstory quickly. So these are very effective. They make people notice. They make people also feel more comfortable as a family setting, just getting out, because we don't want this, quote, cycling community to be restricted to people that you see a lot of time. You kind of, oh, he's a bicycle. We want families. We want everybody to feel kind of comfortable and be safe out on the street. So that's why, another reason, the variability of the level of either signage or protection or striping. Probably the Sharrows is another very common one with the vertical signs. Good example of the green lanes, that's Rock Creek going eastbound up the hill. This is out on 48. So again, two very common examples around Norman.
Yeah, that one's a good example of a former 4-lane street that was put on a road diet
Yes.
to 3 lanes, and it allowed for the bike lanes to be created.
And
So,
that may be probably one of the most positive
yeah,
things that Norman has done is give everybody a little more space to operate with the road diet situation.
Did you get any pictures of this one with the
I think that
actual
bike lane's like
double
10 feet
wide?
wide though.
It's on up on the hill in a different area, yes.
Is it the
It's-
feature picture?
It is further on.
24th.
This is the 24th Street East, and this is how it looks now. This is the one we had to make both kind of quick decision and had the scenario of, we can't get the material, we need to finish it, we want to keep the project both on schedule, but also do it right. And so the BAC was able to have some feedback to transportation to say, with the savings, can we do extra signage? Can we do maybe extra, not only on the pavement, but also the vertical? And that, some folks will know of the Norman Conquest. We have anywhere from 400 to 600 riders, depending on the year. We're still building back, kind of like ridership. So many positive comments on this route from what it was before it was widened, but also the way the routes are, or the way the lanes are installed. People felt the width made them feel safe, but also the lineage and the signs. And this is for people not from Norman, but coming in. And so having experiences from all over the state and even all over the region, but really, really positive feedbacks on what happened on, over on 24th.
So on the 24th, would that be a case where, when we're designing the street, if we're not going to do the green bike lane or the green paint, would it be recommended that the white stripe be double its width that that one is?
That one is something where there's kind of two methods. Here's just basic striping. We did substitute. Actually, we'll just jump ahead.
Well, and I mentioned too on that 24th Avenue bike lane, I've had some cyclists mention about the width of the bike lane and their belief being that the width should be not the curb to the stripe, but the end of the concrete of the curb to the stripe.
The gutter,
Like the gutter part,
area.
it
Okay.
shouldn't be counted
Right.
as part of the, because
Okay.
they can't ride in it. So it's-
Most folks don't feel
So I don't know
comfortable
what
riding
the-
with that.
I don't know what
And
the
you will
general
get different feedback
consensus
from
about that
different
is.
levels of.
I believe this was designed with the 5 feet, not including the gutter pan.
Okay.
And so this was, this is 24th. And so, not to give too much of this would probably be the thing that, the single would be the thing that might be most appropriate for most scenarios. But when you're in a situation, the double line is really, really safe. It gives much more notice to the traffic. The cyclists have a little more play. You can do 2 abreast, still feel safe. If you have issues, 2 folks can maneuver, you can kind of maintain what feels like a little bit higher level of separation and safety. And so this is Rock Creek westbound. And then there's, go ahead, yep. Of course, the most protected in Norman right now, and they're amazing. They're really, really kind of a system and a thing to be proud of. And the cyclists are really starting to use them as they progress eastward out towards the lake. I think there'll be even more traffic on them. But even there's some common, like Wednesday night, there's a Wednesday night ride from downtown. It uses part of the multimodal pathway for several of the groups, be they beginner or be the advanced groups. So it's just a really good, safe way and convenient way to both get around Norman or to get out to the edges where then you can take off on a road you're comfortable for.
And if people don't know or don't remember, we do have applications in to get this path built out towards 272nd if they're both
That's the
accepted.
last leg of it, right?
Well, no, it's supposed to go all the way to Clear Bay.
Okay.
That'd be 2 more miles of it, which would be a great thing.
No, it's supposed to go to 72nd and then connect up with the trail and then
There's,
go
there's two
all
paths,
the way back
yes,
around.
two branches.
So, but it would continue going east
Yes.
even further. Is what
Yes.
you're saying. Okay. Yeah, I'd like to see it keep going west also. You know, the Weather Center and Lloyd Noble Center along that part of Highway 9 eventually as well. So anyway,
One thing we somewhat came up with, the BAC did, kind of on their own, conceptually, is, we struggled with the name, so we just settled on 3D stripe. Basically, and folks are starting to see it around, I kind of started to see it somewhat, and also talking with friends, it's just a double line. And you see it on some of the crosswalks near the schools or things like that. But basically, it gives you a perception of depth without creating any barriers. And as a vehicle operator, that is just that much more obvious. So this right now seems like maybe one of the better methods. It's a little bit new. It hasn't been applied on a continuous basis. Do realize it would take, double stripe, or it would take two pieces of, or two runs of machinery, possibly special machinery. So, but anyway, for striping where there's not opportunities for do the double striping, where you do the chevron and the double, this I think has the potential to add a lot of perceived safety and actually actual protection for folks on the bikes, because it all comes down to being noticed. And this just gives you a stronger visual barrier. Humans, we don't like to drop into dark shadow things. So that's all this is. It also gives you a 3D perspective when you put it next to the white line. So that was something that thought was very appropriate and was a little bit different from, it's not really in any of the guides, I don't think, yet.
No.
So.
But
Norman
we
may,
use black stripe for other reasons, so
Yes.
this would be just
So
an extension of that.
Norman may forge ahead on this one.
seems like a relatively low cost.
Yeah, that was the thing. It was, and with the right equipment, might be able to possibly be done simultaneously, but would not take a lot of construction, would not take epoxying down barriers. But there are opportunities and obviously situations when the flexible barriers, these next barriers, the reason it says, are all coming out of Oklahoma City. So that they have several different methods up there. Most of their green on Walker, they do have some extended. They do have some separated barriers over both the highway and the bridges. They tend to, and seems to work really well, is use the green paint in a very limited scenario for attention getting, or just to designate, be aware, with the addition of the obviously down near the new event center and headed north on Robinson there. It does give a sense, and most of the locations you're not, as a cyclist, you're not blasting through those places. It's a moderate or relaxed pace, and so sometimes the barriers, if you're rolling at what's considered a training pace, they can be a little, if you whack one, it's a little disconcerting. Sure. This is not the scenario that these would be input. These would be to basically, as people cross intersections, people come to intersections, or if there's an area where there's potential for a lot of vehicular or bicycle interaction or pedestrian, these seem to be pretty valuable. And again, just more examples. Obviously, the green with the double and the extra. That was one of the, I believe, Oklahoma City's earlier ones. I don't know how they feel about it. I wasn't able to get with the folks on that. So I see them putting in more just signage, or maybe the double lines and then intermittent. They tend to do almost like the green boxes as a warning, just for notification as you come up on an intersection or a place where bicycles and cars may interact. Not from around here. This is probably one of the northern cities. Totally and completely protected bike lanes with hard barriers. These are very common in Europe. They work very, very well if the traffic will stay out of them. There are numerous stories, and I've been reading a lot. I keep up with the European stuff too. All of a sudden, there's this rash of people that's like, we're just going to use that lane. There's too much traffic. So it's not a guarantee, but it's also very intense, very costly, upkeep, installation, everything like that. So it's probably more common in very bicycle-oriented, the Low Countries, maybe Germany, some places, things like that, Switzerland. But it is kind of the most protected example of a bike lane. I think that's back to you. Nope. It's got one wrap up. Okay. So I mentioned all along, probably the top three obviously would be simple white lineage, just simple designation of a lane. If there's the opportunity, even if there's enough space, the double striping does do a lot to provide notice and protection for a cyclist. And in a lot of cases, the 3D line would act in the same manner, would be a little less intense for installation, but would still provide what we're after as far as protection. As it says there, areas where historically there may have been negative interactions with, or commonly there's problems with either traffic volume or just interactions with cyclists. And there's certain intersections around Norman that's not unusual. So the double white lines, and then if it steps up a level, then possibly the flexible barriers just to keep people separate. I know that can be not a 100% thing, but it does tend to dissuade people.
More.
Much like Oklahoma City, using the green striping for almost like notification or to make sure people are aware of, and it would take them also some information being put out there. This means this. Be aware that there's going to be cyclists or that if you're turning, things like that. So it would add to the information on the ground out there. So that would be a possibility for certain scenarios. But also strongly support just the neighborhood signs, the places where it's 2-lane, not high traffic, folks are just out and around. Just as the map designates, we have 3 levels on the map. We have basically streets, we have multimodal, and then we have the signage. And there's a lot of opportunities in Norman just to get around on a bike if there's signs and if it's a designated route. Keeps it, well, it makes, talking with folks who are just family riders, makes them feel safer and makes them feel more likely to get out, but it still lets the traffic know to be aware. That's it.
Okay, so next steps, we feel, if we can gain acceptance of the recommendations offered tonight from this committee, we have a summary report ready to attach as an appendix in the upcoming update to the engineering design criteria we would like to include, so it's memorialized.
Okay. Questions, comments, recommendations?
Yeah, I would just, have you guys looked at, or what are your thoughts on an actual curb or something? Because I know the flexible barriers, it's great for visual separation, but I'm not sure that stops a car from swerving into your lane. And I think even just a little 6-inch curb, I mean, I know we'd have to figure out drainage issues and kind of
And I
stormwater
think
solutions.
and my understanding is, we looked at that, but then it's a construction issue, and we looked at something that's a little more immediate.
Okay.
Because that would be long-term, because you have to design the roadway to be inclusive of all, and plus drainage, plus all those.
Street
all those-
sweeping.
All those factors.
Right.
Because it takes a special little narrow street sweeper.
Sure.
They're kind of like those little mini Zambonis they use up in the city. So that was looked at, and that's why that one slide of the separate, completely separate. Cyclists maybe a little bit uncomfortable with that because tend to want to have the opportunity to avoid things if it's, and many times it's things in the bike lanes that we're trying to avoid.
Sure.
So the curb would be
Locks you in.
potentially a restriction or a concern there.
That makes sense.
So,
What about, within 50 feet of an intersection or something so that, cars can't, in your example, people swerving around traffic trying to get through an intersection, take out the bike lane.
and again, I think the way we're thinking of the recommendations is work with the transportation folks, so there would be the very specific, maybe limited places where that would be definitely appropriate. And it would be, it'd be like lanes, colors, barriers, and then hard barriers. And so it just, and again, working with this, with the police data, to make all of this kind of a moving or adaptable process.
Sure, it's almost like you need a hierarchy of, heavy traffic areas. get a
Yeah, I
certain
mean, if
treatment.
it's this area, I mean, you could almost go up to, in Europe, they use specialized stop signs and barriers and own lanes and then stop all vehicular traffic. That's not the philosophy, I don't think, in American cities.
Well, and the reason I bring this up is you showed a slide, the one from Europe or wherever with the planters, and there was actually a little yellow
Right, that
separation.
extends back many times. The curb extends back and then there's barriers.
Right.
You saw possibly a little stick-up barriers. Oklahoma City, was it through ACOM?
Yeah, that right.
They had a grant to test some of these things. I don't know of anybody, they were a little bit higher barriers. I'm not sure anybody took advantage of that because they weren't sure how it would be accepted by the car driving community or the cycling community.
Sure.
So,
I'm just thinking, I know the green paint's expensive. I know you mentioned the maintenance issues with the flexible barriers, how they rip up the pavement. You've got, that's an expensive repair. And so is the money spent better on a more permanent, more, I don't know what the word I'm looking for is, something that actually
a hard barrier.
protects
Yeah,
the cyclist,
hard barrier.
I mean, I know the
Right.
visual separation is great, but again, the commingling of car traffic and bike traffic is just, it gives me heartburn, obviously. And so if there's a better way to spend that money,
Right.
I think I'd be all yours.
And moving forward with future transportation plans, I think that's an opportunity, but I think it's almost at that level of,
Okay.
because it is hardscaping for, for the transportation system.
Well, I think like the city of Moore, I believe their roadway standard now includes a 10-foot wide sidewalk standard, and so
Okay.
it's it's essentially a walk path and a bike
Yeah,
path.
I've
It's
used
off
some
the
of those.
road.
Yeah,
and,
you have the opportunity to, on some of the busy roads, it's like, I'm just going to the sidewalk
right.
type thing.
So-
And that might be the other opportunity in Norman is to institute that where we have the multimodal pathways, but we also have sidewalks or wider areas that for safe cycling in certain busy areas and is also, we allude, it's like, and most cyclists don't go out on game days, but some folks do, so, just provide everybody opportunities to be safe, so. And without a big investment, the other thing we try to be cycling community, and what you just mentioned right there was, that's a benefit for the pedestrian community
Absolutely.
as well, and so, in fact, and I participate in the ACOG, which is the Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Committee, they
Right.
put them together.
Yeah,
So-
I know there's an idea to connect, basically Norman to Moore to Oklahoma City through a series of bike trails.
Yes,
And if we can have
yes.
some continuity with what other cities are doing, I think, looking at our engineering design criteria, it's a perfect time to try to implement. I don't know if we're too late in the game to get something like that put in there, but
I think
I'd
moving
love to see
forward,
some more
it's worth
study.
evaluating, yeah.
sorry, didn't mean to dominate.
Yeah, great conversation. Councilman Grant.
I understand the recommendations for, certain high conflict areas. My question is, when you were studying all this, were those areas like, compared to the NPD data, low conflict because of all the infrastructure that was already at some of this, in these locations?
Probably the only way that was captured was when we looked at the police data. It was obvious where the high conflict areas were, but then there were streets and there were intersections, there was other things.
Did any of them have some of this stuff? I mean, obviously there's green white ones on 24th and Lindsay and
The bike lane network and the data were kind of hard to put together, and they also haven't been in place possibly long enough to get a real feel. Also with the code issues, and then some of the other things as far as there was a pretty dramatic increase in recreational ridership during the times when everybody was staying home with their families. And so I think we're still honestly trying to figure that out. And that's why we didn't want to say, do these things have opportunities for Norman to kind of like, this is a low conflict area, maybe you just need to sign so that people know it's a bike route, or maybe designate that coming up on an intersection and there's bicycles around, or maybe stripes where you get more traffic. So we were trying to be, that's a way we were trying to be, I guess, adaptable and variable to different volumes of ridership as well as kinds of
I haven't
ridership.
seen like a particular intersections that already identified as like, no, we should probably do that third level or third recommendation of like
The one David alluded to or mentioned early, and there's a few others, the one going across Highway 9,
Both avenues southeast.
that one's pretty exciting. I ride that one at least once a week.
Well, the situation there is, yeah, the bike lane is coming across Highway 9, but traffic exiting off of Highway 9 onto 12th has a dedicated right turn lane, and the geometry kind of just takes you right. And a lot of cars do just follow it
Yeah,
right over.
yeah.
They
And
merge
then-
without.
And coming the other way, you're feeling pretty good, and then,
The lane goes all the way like a quarter mile down the road.
We've
So-
identified that merge area for them, but that's
so,
just a recommendation.
Yeah.
Lindsay Street's another one as more and more traffic comes in with the new construction, and probably the new, not only vehicular, but bicycle traffic over around Reeves Park and all of that.
We also have James Garner 3, I want to say. Is that the one that goes into the heart of downtown by the
I
library?
believe that's phase 3, isn't it?
And that will be part of,
Two.
that'll be
Yes,
part multimodal, is my
And
understanding.
we are going to be expanding the Legacy Trail, and it will be all the way through there, so it will be as separate from the roadway. One of the other locations that you alluded to, so that connection from Moore to Norman and continuing north, that's along 36 Avenue Northwest, which is a project that's been in design. And we're taking that and we're taking the bicycle lanes off the roadway, and we're doing a 10-foot multimodal path. We already had that on the South Mile
Okay.
for Ruby Grant Park, but we're going to extend that to North Mile, and then we're looking at extending that as the projects continue on to the city limits. So
And more will pick it up on their
and then more will pick it up. And so we've coordinated which side of the road to be on.
Love it.
But we are starting to look at more of, do we want to separate and have, a lot of places call them a cycle track, where it's totally separate, not on roadway. So we're starting to evaluate that more, and a lot of that is with the work of the BAC and their recommendations.
I'm really glad to hear that you guys are already thinking about it, so that's huge.
Oh, Norman is, from my perspective, and this is not a BAC member speaking, this is a cyclist way ahead and thinking, the things they've done are amazing, but the thinking and the planning is really impressive from just my experience around and having done this for a long time.
Excellent.
Yeah, hopefully eventually all of our main roads will either have a bike lane or the 10-foot.
Yep.
Some of them have both, but hopefully we'll have one or the other on all of our streets, our main streets at some point. It seems like there's consensus from the current members of the committee here to accept your recommendations. And I would definitely like to see them become part of our policy and start implementing them. The 12th Avenue Highway 9 one is definitely one I'd like to see addressed with some of these potential, just that part where it just could be 10 feet, I don't know. But that one and Lindsay Street are the only two I'm thinking of right now where bike lanes merge with traffic lanes, or where traffic crosses across them and things. So where we've heard some feedback from folks about it being a little bit tricky right there. Yeah.
Just one more thing, I do, the images you showed of the green striping kind of just being with the 100 feet of the intersection, and then the the hashes that kind of, yeah, the right, the one on the right where you can actually see at the end, it's actually got the continuous green. I think I'm really in favor of that in lieu of, having the entire thing be
Yeah.
green because it's a big maintenance issue,
Yeah,
a big cost
functionally
issue.
anymore, I
and
don't know if the green's going to.
It comes up and
Yeah.
you've got patchy spots.
Intersections
where-
make sense.
Yeah.
As people are, turning onto a street and letting them know that's a bike lane right there. But
and I really like the visual cue of the striping, the horizontal striping actually draws
Yeah.
your attention and makes you want to slow down a little, or at least become more aware. So that's all I wanted to say.
Okay, this is not a warning, this is very much along these lines. The other thing that the BAC will probably eventually bring to you guys, there's a thing called Art in the Intersection.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And there are, basically it's a mural in an intersection. And it sounds like, oh, that's nifty. But there's a whole lot of actually traffic studies related to this, that you can decrease pedestrian or bicycle vehicle interactions in that setting by like 50 to 60%, just because everybody's more aware.
Yeah.
So we may start thinking, well, okay, this is me. That may be something we want to explore. It would be the cycling community, community improvement, the arts council, all of this stuff. But it would go to, I just think of it as, and obviously there's specific areas that it would be most valuable, maybe in the high traffic areas downtown, areas out on 24, things like that. But that'll be maybe a step along.
I actually think there's some placemaking grants available for that through ARPA.
There, the
The Bloomberg thing, yes.
Bloomberg
That's what it is.
has
I've seen
both a
some-
lot of studies and some money available. So this came up kind of at the end of our study and our evaluation and our recommendations, but maybe moving forward, that would be something Norman could look at as
I'd love
well.
to see it get included this time if we could.
Because I kind of like the idea of putting it, Norman has an art
it's interesting.
reputation as well as a cycling, so we could put it all together.
Okay. That's good. Well, I think you have direction from us, it sounds like. I appreciate all your work, the rest of the committee and everybody, the time spent on this. It's a growing deal in Norman, and I agree. I think we're way ahead of, I know Oklahoma City's been doing a lot, but I feel like we were doing it before them and more intensely. And other cities in Oklahoma are hopefully starting to see it and see the benefit in it that we see. And it's exciting from my perspective to be able to connect our community in such a way. I'm always bragging about Legacy Trail and how you can go from the lake, or when it's finished, you'll be able to go from the lake all the way through the heart of the campus, through the core neighborhoods, through downtown, and all the way through the UMP and by the new hospital, all the way up through Ruby Grant Park, all the way to Moore. Basically just all through every section of the
And
city almost.
there's other hope and planned connections that you may be able to eventually end up at Draper.
Yeah,
Starting out
yeah.
at Thunderbird and ride your bike not on a road all the way up to Draper. And
Get
some really
Noble
nice,
in and
really nice
get down there
opportunities,
and-
yeah.
Yeah, well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank
and
you.
look forward to continuing on this issue in the future.
I said ARPA, it's AARP. Okay. And it's about aging in place and healthy bodies.
Okay.
It's real. I mean, it's a real grant program that's used across the United States.
Okay, we've got two more items on the agenda. The next one, item number 3, is a discussion regarding a bridge maintenance bond program. We have city staff here. An issue we've talked a lot about, given the 70-plus bridges we have in Norman, the age of some of them, the lack of outside funds really to maintain them. And so the idea of a separate bond maintenance program, similar to what we have with our road maintenance bond program, to have a way to adequately keep up with these things, is something we've talked about. So we have staff here to give us a presentation
Thank you,
about
Mr.
it.
Chairman. Council members, appreciate the chance. I'm co-presenting with Joe Hill, our street and bridge and alley, what else do you do? Program manager. Again, I joke about this, but we have lots of streets, 800 miles. We have 80 bridges, 300 culvert crossings, 30 miles of alleys, and an entire staff of 32 to do all that work. When I moved here in 2007, I moved from a city in Kansas, Salina, Kansas, had or actually less than half, 300 miles of streets, and I had 55 staff members 15 years ago doing what 32 do for twice as much. So I always like to appreciate Joe and the staff for the incredible work that they do, and bridges has been one of our challenges. Also want to recognize Brandon Brooks in the back of the room, who's done a lot of the heavy lifting. Brandon is one of our staff engineers, and of course Scott Sturts and I have been frankly working on the bridge program for 10 or 15 years trying to get to this point. So we are excited to be here and appreciate the chance to present to you an idea. We want to give you some background and so you understand the bridge story first of all, but these are our words. A bridge maintenance bond program is something that you might think is a terrible idea. That's okay. These are our words. We've built the concept around, I think, what is one of the city of Norman's most successful programs, and that is our street maintenance bond program. And if you go back 25 years ago, we were doing a terrible job with neighborhood street maintenance. We were doing nothing with neighborhood street maintenance. And so we developed a concept of a data-driven program, and then that resulted in our first bond election in March of 2005 for, I think, $9 million in street maintenance on neighborhood streets. Barely passed, but we've gone back 3 more times, every 5 years, 2010, 2016, and 2021. And with each election, we've gotten a higher voter approval. And I think the reason for that is because it is a data-driven program. It's not you all making these decisions or we making these decisions. It is a data-driven, proven program. And every 5 years, we have delivered on what we said. With each of those bond ordinances, there's a list of streets. And they can read which streets and they can see the maps. It's the same thing here. We think a data-driven program will appeal to our voters, and we hope you'll agree. So,
And it's typically in the road maintenance bond case is not a tax increase because it's already using the existing,
Yeah.
which is always why we're trying to make sure it doesn't expire so we don't have to
bingo.
raise taxes again.
Anyway, that's where this concept came from. It may not be what council wants to do, but that we thought it'd be a good discussion tonight and hopefully going forward. So a little bit of background about bridges. If you're watching any of the political ads that I'm watching, you're hearing that Oklahoma is 5th in the country in condition of bridges. When I came here in 2007, we were 49th in the country. And it was really apparent to me. I remember driving literally from Kansas, who was 4th in the country, to Oklahoma, who was 49th in the country, and I could tell the difference when I crossed the border. Our data says we're 7th. That may be, Governor Stitt may have better information than we have, but the published data says we're 7th. That's awesome. And what that means is the state of Oklahoma has done a wonderful job. We think the engineers at ODOT always knew what to do. They knew how many bridges, 6,700 bridges. They knew how to fix them. They just didn't have any money. It was that simple. And around 2007 is when the legislature started to budget funding for bridge maintenance. And look what they did in 17 years. It is a wonderful story, wonderful in our industry. We know what to do. We know how to fix bridges. We just don't have the money. And that's what we're going to talk about
It did
tonight.
take a loss of life incident at the Weber Falls for
Yeah.
really to get the attention of the legislature, I think. And
That was a big springboard. You hear about that?
Norman lost a city employee and his family, his wife, former detective. I don't know if he was still a detective, but he was maybe a retired Norman police detective. He and his wife were
Where's that
victims
story?
in that
And
accident.
You hear about the Weber Falls story a
Yeah,
lot.
that's what kind of, I know Governor Henry and then Governor Fallon, I know that was a big point of her administration too, was getting us to this point.
Yeah, I've not been to an engineering conference since I've been here where we don't hear about this wonderful story. So for us geek engineers who like to talk about bridges, but it's a wonderful story in our profession of bridge engineers of how to fix a problem, but it takes money, lots and lots of money. What you're not hearing in these political ads or any other coverage is that they are just talking about the state-owned bridges,
Right.
what we call on-system. So God bless them. They've done a great job with their state-owned bridges, but they haven't helped us a lick in the off-system bridges owned by cities, counties, townships, and others. We still have 16,000 bridges, and we are still ranked 40th in the nation. That's Norman's problem, and it's not unique to Norman. Oklahoma City is having these same discussions. Tulsa, Many cities aren't doing anything, frankly. They're just hoping that someday they can get some money. We think it's time to stop hoping and do something about it. It's really getting pretty serious here. But we're not alone in this. In fact, we think we're kind of ahead of the game. I think the work that Joe and Brandon and our staff have done over recent years to put this together for you tonight is way ahead of what most cities are doing, certainly in Oklahoma. So a little quick history on our program. Our bridge maintenance program, if you talk in terms of dollars, is entering its 6th year. We've been talking about this for a long time, but again, there was no funding for us to do anything with our bridges. So what we were doing was the biannual inspection. This was, I think, one of the smartest thing the Federal Highway Administration ever did. I was thinking this morning when I was in my first year of Public Works Engineering, 1983, my Public Works Director boss sent me to bridge inspection school because we only had 3 engineers on staff, and he wanted me to do the bridge inspections for the city of Dodge City, Kansas at that time, and because we were going to save money. So FHWA has been doing this for at least 4 decades, maybe 5, requiring all of us to do inspections. Great thing. So we know a lot about our bridges. We know that they're in bad shape. We just don't, again, have the money to fix them, but we know a lot about them. You'll see that here in a minute. We have partnered with an engineering firm called H.W. Lochner in the last 3 cycles. Previous to that, there were other firms that helped us. These are bridge engineering experts that help us do those inspections of the 80 federally rated bridges. Council then, based on that, we were sort of building a program 10 years ago or so about what if we had some money, could we actually change the condition of those bridges? Not replace them, we know that was never going to happen, but could we actually put the money into maintenance and repair and really make an impact? And the answer is yes, and we have. So council for the first time adopted bridge maintenance money in FY18, so 5 cycles ago, 5 budgets ago, $100,000 that first year in capital funding. We learned pretty quickly that that wasn't going to go very far on bridges. And so in this budget year, you all have appropriated $750,000. And we appreciate that very, very much. And that is starting to make a real impact. We are doing a bridge maintenance program every year, going out to bid on 6 to 8 bridges, Joe, roughly that number. And we're carefully selecting those 6 to 8 bridges where we think the dollars will make the biggest impact. So, and we are already seeing those ratings come down, so it's really working. So if you look at the total, so far council has budgeted a little over $2 million for bridge maintenance in 5 years, and that's a great start to a great program. Here's how we shape up right now. It's actually not as bad as it might seem. We've got a lot of bridges of the 80 that are in decent shape and salvageable. In 2017, we had 18 structurally deficient bridges. This year, or last year, we had 5. That means we're making progress on those structural deficient issues. But 15 are still at risk of being deficient, and we'll talk more about it. It's really time to replace some of these 80-year-old bridges in Norman. There's just nothing else we can do to maintain them. I mentioned the data-driven part of this. We've got it. We're not going to bore you with it tonight, but this is just a map of the 80 bridges. These all have a special federal number. The bridge inspection process is very intense, very technical, very carefully done. It has to be done by licensed civil engineers and so on. So we have all that data. We have it mapped. We have notebooks of every structural evaluation of the bridges. So we have the data, just like we did in 2004 for street maintenance, and we know what we have, we know what to do.
All right. So why is this a problem now? Why are we here tonight? And it's not necessarily that this is a problem now, but we've kind of taken a step back over the last couple of years with the most recent inspection cycle and tried to create a more proactive approach to the bridge maintenance program and some outlook there. Unfortunately, we've had 3 failures in the last 6 years. The Havenbrook Bridge over on the west side of town there, just south of Robinson Street. The Main Street Bridge, again, over on the west side of town. And also the Imhoff Road Bridge, our most recent, in July of 2021. Our conditions, again, we've made strides now that we've got some funding coming in, but the conditions are still trending in the wrong direction, unfortunately, with the current funding, and we're just trying to kind of get ahead of that here. So this slide here just gives you an idea of all the different vehicles that you'll see on our roadways at any given time. But we like to kind of focus on three specifics: your ambulance, your school bus, and your fire truck. So we'll go through the next couple slides here are our most prominent load-rated bridges. So 60th Avenue Northeast over Rock Creek. Built in 1940, no ambulance, no school bus, no fire truck. Really, nothing more than that red pickup truck should be going over that bridge at any given time. So
It's a little confusing concept. Let me elaborate for a minute. One of the only tools we have in our toolbox when we get that bridge inspection done and they tell us that the bridge is in trouble, we can close it, which we hate to do because it's really not unsafe for a passenger vehicle or a pickup truck, but it is for a certain loading. So those engineers are determining that the weight limit for that bridge is 4 tons. All we can do is put up a sign. And that's what we do in this city and across the country. You've seen them. You probably never thought about them because you probably don't drive vehicles in excess of 4 tons. But our school bus drivers know about this, our ambulance drivers, our fire truck drivers. They have routes mapped, and they do not go over these bridges. This is a real thing. Now, does the concrete truck go over there when he's delivering concrete? Probably does, and we hope that nothing bad happens. But this is why we have load-rated bridges across the country. This is the only ththing we can do to say, please, please, please don't drive over this bridge if you are in excess of this load.
Councilor
Before you move on real quick, I think an important caveat of that, you showed a slide earlier that showed that the F-150 pickup truck was 3 tons, and that's not including anything in the bed or any kind of trailer or anything. So consumer vehicles, private vehicles, I think, are approaching these limits. And I mean, I know, just
absolutely.
point that out.
Exactly, exactly.
I just wanted to say I had the benefit of having my orientation with fire maybe a couple weeks ago, and Chief King showed me the map, and immediately what stood out were the number of bridges that could support fire trucks, and actually that's a problem for Ward 5. So yeah, just to reiterate, I get the weight limit part.
Yeah, there's actually 3 wards, we'll talk about that here in a minute, that are impacted by load-rated bridges. So.
But if it was improved, they would have better response times, and that would be great for the rest of the city.
That's exactly right. Thank you.
Absolutely.
That's exactly right. It's a public safety issue. This isn't just a bridge issue, it just isn't a maintenance thing, it's a public safety issue that we have here.
Absolutely.
Or did you have a,
Yeah, go ahead.
okay.
Well, I'll take some questions in a minute. Yeah.
Okay, the question was, what about pre-maintenance? If we were to do the pre-maintenance on some of these bridges, would that repair them enough where we would not have to demonstrate them with water damage and all that, and it would keep them for longer?
Yeah, no question, John. We kind of covered that a minute ago, and that's that the city of Norman, like most cities, really hasn't done preventive maintenance. Again, these are 82-year-old bridges, so we've had a lot of years to do maintenance, and I'm sure we did some, but rarely have we
Starting to
done
do that now,
what we should.
maybe.
You bet.
But how many would we be able to save this year if we got it done right now?
Well, we're doing it this year with, as we said earlier, $750,000 is going to those bridges that we think we can save or at least prolong the life. Nothing was designed or built to last 80 years. I mean, is your home 80 years old? So frankly, bridge designers in 1942 were certainly not thinking about an 80,000-pound semi. That wasn't a glimmer in their eye. So it's not just the condition of the structure, but the design basis that we used to design the bridge in the first place, width, depth, all that sort of
How
thing.
many bridges should be on that list right now to be taken care of on pre-maintenance?
We're doing about 6 to 8 a year.
Yeah.
Okay, but how many do we need to have to make sure we save those bridges instead of then going down into worse shape where we end up paying in the long distance
No,
right
sure.
now.
That's kind of why we're here, John. I'm not sure we're prepared to answer that question, but I think if we address the replacements and the major maintenance, we will be back to a very
That's
manageable.
what I'm trying to say is, what do you really need to save those bridges so it doesn't cost us in the long run a lot more money?
That's
And
why we're here.
what I'm trying to say.
You bet. That's why we're here.
So, oh, sorry, I think I jumped ahead there one. So, Robinson Street Bridge. This one was constructed in 1938. This is the same condition, so no ambulance, school, or fire. Again, just to reiterate, the reason we post these signs, it's a way to keep the road open for as long as possible. Quite frankly, once you go below 4 tons, that bridge is shut down legally. Franklin Road, just west of 36th Avenue Northeast. It's 1942. Again, there's a trend there. Very old structures. I think the average design life at that time probably would have been 25 years. I don't think they ever envisioned them lasting for 80. So, and we have a large volume of structures that are this age. When you look at the load posted map, you just kind of see that they are spread out. We do have some in the urban parts of the city, but a lot more in the rural sections.
And Imhoff Bridge is still on it, even after the repairs, I guess, is that,
Imhoff Road Bridge is not load posted.
so the red square there?
The red square indicates structurally deficient bridges.
Okay,
And
so it's still a
Imhoff's-
structurally deficient.
It will not be.
Okay.
By my estimation. The only reason it's listed on this map is because our repairs were taking place during the last inspection cycle. And so during the next inspection cycle, we anticipate that bridge coming off the ESD list.
Great. Councilor Pico?
Just for clarification, we look at these 4-ton, 5-ton. Is that just assuming one car on the bridge at a time? I mean, what happens if there's an accident and you've got multiple stacked up? I mean,
It's total load.
okay,
basically.
that's,
You bet. That's right.
sorry not to create a.
That's okay.
No.
You're on the right wavelength.
So, as Sean stated, very, very data driven. And again, part of that proactiveness is we got the 2021 inspection cycle report in December of 2021. And that led us to what we're calling the discovery, the bridge discovery. We contracted with our consultant, H.W. Lochner, used some very general ranking criteria, so age, load rating, and the condition rating of all of our structures in our inventory. And we kind of queued up the top 20 that we had in the system. And with H.W. Lochner's help, we ended up creating a report that ultimately led to the current proposed bridge maintenance bond that we've got for you here tonight. So with that, we took the Lochner report, we added formulas to account for some of the inflation trends that we're seeing right now, additional contingency to cover some of the additional engineering that we think could be possible, and even some of the channel work that could have to take place in order to protect these structures. And ultimately, that produced $45 million over the course of 10 years to replace 10 structures and major rehabilitation and maintenance on 9 structures. And so you'll see the Main Street Bridge over Brookhaven Creek here at the 4.9 million. That's a pretty good picture of what a bridge project can look like as a full reconstruction. Now, this one did include channel stabilization that went south of the structure and a short distance north of the structure as a part of that cost, but it's a system. That channel's a system, and that bridge is a part of that system. And then you'll see what a major rehabilitation, a good example of that is our Imhoff Road Bridge recently completed. That was a $1.9 million project. that structure, the main structure there, is a 50-year-old structure with brand-new end sections at this point in time. So the north and south end sections fully reconstructed. The main structure is in good condition. Again, we do expect that to be an improvement. I mentioned before that we had kind of our top 20 bridges. Imhoff Road obviously ranked in those top 20, so that has been excluded from this now that we've completed that emergency repair.
So our finance department helped us with the table, the dollars table, that I wish Anthony was still here. But we tend to do this when we have elections here in Norman to just help people understand what the impact to their wallet might be. So take the 100,000, 150,000, 200,000. I think in our recent stormwater election, we said 150 was kind of the median number in Norman. It may be creeping up a little bit beyond that, but this is what a $45 million ad valorem bond issue would impact those homes. I want you to dwell on that for a minute. Those are big numbers. This is a $10 or $9.50 tax increase per month if you own a $200,000 home. That didn't go well when we went out for the stormwater election bond issue. One of the reasons I think the street maintenance bond program is also successful is that after the first one, the 2005 election, that was a new tax, a new property tax. But in 2010, we advertised that as no new tax, but instead a continuation of the same mill levy. And that mill levy, of course, increases and raises more money with each valuation each year. So I think that's another reason that's popular. Maybe another reason why it barely passed in 2005. But when we think about whether this is the method you choose to use or this is the number you choose to advance, this is a big deal. And voters are not going to be happy about it, generally. Homeowners, property owners. Because it is a fairly big number. $7 if you own a $150,000 home per month increase. We think that's a good bargain for what we're offering here, but I'm not sure every citizen is going to agree with us. So this is where the marketing and the stuff that engineers and street guys can't help you with.
It's $113.88 per year at that top tier rate. So, and the average home in Norman is $250. I don't even know now. It's like maybe it's 400
Could be.
for all I know.
I don't, we can figure that out.
Councilor Peacock.
I know these bridge projects take a long time, so this might not be a feasibility, but do we look at a 5-year schedule similar to the street?
We're proposing a 10-year program, Councilmember, that we think we can deliver these 19 bridge projects in 10 years.
Just didn't know if it softened the blow if we started out with a smaller window and then maybe tried to, come back to the well 5 years later.
Good thought.
Build on the success of the initial program.
This is what we think we can handle.
Gotcha.
We don't have to do this,
Okay.
but we think we can handle 2 bridges a year, and we'll talk about that in a minute. We've already got the first 2 teed up. But that's going to be a heavy program to have 2 fairly major bridge projects a year. Have not done that typically in Norman. It's manageable.
Right.
They'll be in different geographic locations, but from a staffing standpoint, it's a challenge.
Well, and you're exactly right that there's going to be some heartburn with the community
And
on
this-
this, and if we can soften that anyway.
This would be all local funding too.
This proposal is, and we'll talk about some other funding opportunities in a
Councilor
minute.
Grant.
I was gonna just go back to that public safety part. Some people might see a savings on their insurance, if they were not in that 4-minute, zone.
You bet. Great point, Councilmember. And those are the kind of things that, again, good marketing people can help you with if you were to advance something like that. I just know that, let's face it, out of the last 9 election propositions, we've lost 7. Our track record isn't real good right now, and we don't want to lose another one. So we're good with all the engineering, and we feel really comfortable with what we're offering you from a technical perspective about which bridges to do and how to do them. We're not election people. That's where the real hard decisions come to council and to the community. In the stormwater case, you had a 23-member citizen committee that worked for 3 years to develop that. We had a marketing campaign. We had a separate firm out of Austin, Texas, who came in and trained us on how to speak to our citizens. We did a lot, and it still lost. It still went down. So it is hard to get an election approved in Norman, Oklahoma. That's just the way it is. So let's be careful about that, is I guess the message. And you'll need people other than Joe and I to help you with that. That's not what we know how to do.
So this here is just a map of the proposed bridge bond locations. So again, our kind of what we're considering our top 19 priority locations in the city. You'll see that the more rural sections of the city are the ones where we have the replacements slated. That is where we see the highest volume of really old structures. That is also when a lot of those structures were probably built, they were still county bridges by all rights, and the city inherited those when we annexed, and so you do see that trend, but we also have a lot of urban activity that would need to take place to really boost this program.
So those would probably be the priority too then first, is to do those first and then.
We think the replacements are the most critical, that they reach that critical stage of condition and safety concern.
So Ward 5 residents would know there's several in your ward and you're gonna be the first ones too, if this were to happen.
Well, if you look at the map, I mean, you can't go east-west in Norman without hitting one of those.
Yeah.
You really cannot get to the lake.
And Joe makes a really good point, is that these were old county bridges, probably never designed to the level that they ever imagined we would grow to today. Imagine if our road system were to change with a turnpike and other things happen out there. Whatever that thing turns out to be, you're going to have more traffic in that part of the city. And these bridges are going to be even more impacted.
So along with that, we obviously we're very good and very hungry for any grant funding we can find. We're always looking, but we've made multiple comments in the past about how bridge funding just doesn't materialize. Definitely not regular, and in very unique locations. But in June of 22, we did get some really good information. The Federal Highway Administration announced the Bridge Investment Program, which are Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act funds, so IIJA funds, that have been slated for the next 5 years, $2.4 billion annually, to include planning grants, bridge project grants, and large bridge project grants. Large bridge projects are considered $20 million or more. We're probably not going to fall into that category, thankfully. We took a run at a planning grant back in July of 22. Unfortunately, that grant was unsuccessful. 23 planning grants were awarded nationwide. One was to the state of Oklahoma for a on-system bridge over Lake Texoma. We took that information and digested those awards. We had a wonderful grant package that was put together by our consultant Garber, and we've requested a debrief through the Federal Highway Administration. But one thing that we noticed in just our general look at that award package was that all of those locations had a very large regional and cross-jurisdictional impact. So that's one thing we have to look at moving forward as we continue to kind of refine ourselves and look at those funding sources, is what is our regional impact? And the answer is fairly limited. In reality, our bridges don't have as large of an impact as some of the projects that were awarded on here.
And in most of these programs, even the IIJA program, we're competing with ODOT. So once again, even though they're in better condition, they have a lot more horses than we've got, and they got a lot more bridges to propose. So that'd be one of our challenges. Yes. We're not giving up, but that grant funding, whether it's for bridges or roadways, Scott's team has been working on 36th Avenue. We're on our second failed application there. So it's not easy to get. As some might think it is. So some takeaways we hope for you tonight. We know this is the first time we'll talk about this kind of formally. Appreciate it very much. But again, we have 80 bridges and over 300 culvert crossings in Norman. Lots, that's a lot. Our bridges are safe. I hope no one comes away from this discussion thinking, oh my God, can I drive over bridges in Norman? They're very safe. If they weren't, they wouldn't be open, which is why we inspect them regularly and make sure that they're suitable. Some are load rated, so that is different. But if we have an unsafe bridge in Norman, it will be closed tomorrow morning, as soon as we know about that, which is what happened in the 3 bridge collapses in the last 5 years. 23 of our bridges were constructed before 1950. I don't think you have to have much more than that right there. I mean, we are talking about 70 and 80-year-old bridges that were never designed to last that long, and they've done great to have done that. There comes a time when you just have to replace things. Again, this is just a possible 10-year bridge maintenance bond program tonight. You might think it's a terrible idea. That's okay. You won't hurt our feelings. We don't have any other answers for you tonight. We just know that we've got 19 bridges that really need attention. We think that's going to cost about $45 million over the course of 10 years. And if there's another way to get that funding or in other sequences, we'll work with you any way we can. And right now, just like stormwater, there is no steady, predictable funding source for bridge replacements or major repair. There just isn't. It's not in the city, it's not the state, it's not in the federal government, it's just not there.
Well, and I've typically seen with the road maintenance bond program that we've been able to deliver those projects very quickly and in many times under budget. My recollection during my time on council is that we've typically had extra funds, and we've been able to use road maintenance funds excess because we were able to get projects in under budget and had savings that we were able to fill the budget gap on other road projects and things that didn't have what they needed. So I would expect the same. Part of our pitch being that we have a really good track record with this type of program, and we've been able to extend it even further, the dollars even further typically too. So, and I would assume that having a dedicated funding source like this could put us in a better position for other funding and grants and things. So, Councilmember Grant.
I was just gonna say, I'm supportive of the proposal, obviously. I don't know about trying to get over the finish line with the voters, but I would hope those watching at home recognize the public safety aspect of that, especially the folks that don't live within that 4-minute emergency response time.
Appreciate that. This is like so many of our programs, it's never going to get cheaper. It's never going to go away. Your next option is to start closing roads. That's really the next thing that'll happen on those particularly load-rated roads. And that will not be popular. It never is, especially when you're on major arterials.
Well, it should be a pretty nonpartisan issue, you would think, or bipartisan. As far as people working together, this is the type of thing that we're here to do as city council members. This type of thing is what I think the people expect us to be addressing. And I think most people understand bridges and safety, and it's expensive. So I do feel pretty confident about moving this forward. I definitely think the whole council deserves to weigh in and see if this is the right program, 10 years or whatever rate may be. Maybe it's more, I don't know. But I do think definitely the whole council should weigh in on this, and I definitely personally feel pretty confident about moving forward with a program like this. I feel like despite some of our missteps on some other bonds, that this seems like one that is kind of straight across. It's not a rain tax or impervious surface or whatever. It's bridges and bridge maintenance. So
Thank you.
okay, yeah, Councilor Pico.
I totally support all that. I think it's imperative that we get this done, imperative we get it over the finish line. So I know you've got the 10-year window. I really would like to see if we could do an initial, like I said, a shorter window just to soften the blow and make sure that we can get voter support, because if we miss on the first one, I don't know when we could bring it back for a second time. I think we've seen that with water and the bind that puts us in. So whatever we can do to ensure its success.
Thank you. That's great feedback. Appreciate that very much. Ready to take it back to full council and go forward. Want to mention, just so you know, nothing just ends here. What we're doing in terms of our next steps as staff council, I think you know this, on October 11th this year, just not too long ago, you all approved a contract for design of the 60th Avenue Northeast Bridge and the Porter Avenue Bridge with Garver Engineers. And so we are on our way to getting those projects shovel-ready. That's the goal. Whatever happens, whether it's city funding or federal funding, shovel-ready projects are always the best ones to win grants. And those are our worst two bridges in terms of need of attention. So that's moving forward, and we're ready to apply for grants as soon as the design advances to that level. And we're going to continue to pursue every grant. Goodness, I think we're getting 4 or 5 a week. Some weeks I feel like all we do is write grants these days. But it is what it is, and you throw 10 lines in the water, you hope for one bite. So we're working that as hard as we can in both bridges and roadways. So thank you. Appreciate the time tonight.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Okay, our next item on the agenda is a discussion regarding landlocked parcels. There's a particular piece of land in my ward that this issue has come up with, but it got me thinking if there are other instances in the city of Norman where this might come up in the future, it might be a good idea for us to talk about it and what our existing policies are, how that compares to others. And so just a kind of a interesting little quirk about city zoning is some issues like this sometimes you don't really think about. You see a piece of property and think, oh, you can build something right there. And sometimes you can, and sometimes it's a little more complicated. So Scott, we've heard some stories about the house out the backyard and all that stuff. And so staff is here and has got a presentation for us.
Fantastic, thank you. I'm going to be doing the bulk of the speaking today. Beth Muckle has joined me so that she may add in some stuff and where I maybe leave some information out that she may have, and also to help me with any questions so that we can try to help you with any questions you might have. So what we want to talk about today is landlocked parcels. And these basically are parcels that do not have access to a public street. In my design career, when I was doing subdivision work in multiple states here in the Midwest, I can't think of any location or any time that we ever proposed doing a landlocked parcel. And it's kind of that, one of those basic tenets of land design, of land subdivisions, you do not create parcels without access to public streets, public roadways. This is not allowed per our subdivision regulations, section 19203 and 19407. I'm not going to read that whole section to you because I think that's redundant, but it does say, except as permitted by Article 6, excuse me, I can't read Roman numerals today, of this chapter, it shall be unlawful for any person, firm, or corporation to sell, or any other person, blah, 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 any block or tract of land that abuts on I'm messing this one up today, that abuts on a public street or road. So basically you have to be on a public street or road based on this section. This isn't just in our zoning regs or in our subdivision regs. It also goes into our zoning ordinances. So it stretches further and beyond that on its own. Commercial industrial lots are also addressed in Chapter 19. They're not allowed in Section 407, which says commercial industrial use. Such lots shall abut a public street frontage or otherwise on a minimum of one side. When we were looking through, I spent some time looking at Edmond and Oklahoma City. They both have very similar language to what we say. I know Beth looked even further out than that, and she had trouble finding communities that went beyond and did allow these landlocked parcels. Obviously, this is kind of confusing. Got to admit that subdivision regulations can be hard to read and interpret. And so we do get a lot of questions from the public on issues like this and questions regarding this. So one location that's been brought up recently that kind of prompted this presentation today, got the aerial up there. This is on Classen or Highway 77, just south of Highway 9 on the west side of the road. You've got Buffalo Wild Wings there to the north, then Taco Bell, and then what is now Casey's convenience store. And then just south of that, there is a strip shopping center there that faces Highway 77, along with another building in the back that last time I was over there was a gym back there and some other businesses. So this was originally platted in October of 2007. You can see how it was laid out there. North is kind of to the right or left, excuse me, of this sheet. It was laid out in tracts that all had property or frontages abutting Highway 77.
And isn't that a requirement of the plating process?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
As it was stated, that's part of that, again, goes back to that subdivision reg that says that it has to, that all parcels have to abut a roadway. As time went on, the property owner had an opportunity to make a sale of what is now Casey's convenience store. And this was part of the lot line adjustment that they did that was filed a record in 2012. So on the left shows you what it looked like before in the original plat, and on the right is what they adjusted the lot lines to. So you can see that they made that lot there in the front where Casey sits. And my only guess is that they said, we don't want to pay you for all the land, or they don't want to maintain what's behind them. And so the owner of the tracks, it was the same owner of both tracks, retained that parcel and put it as a part of the lot to the south, creating the lots in the configuration that you see there on the right. Not uncommon, not hard to do. And totally legal. Nothing's wrong with this because it was still a lot with frontage to a public roadway. So a proposal's been brought forward to basically, if you look at that drawing there with the yellow outline, that's the lot that's in question, to subdivide it with that line in pink, creating two lots. And obviously this creates a lot there in the back along the railroad tracks behind Casey's that does not have public roadway frontage. And because of that, this causes us the problems that we're coming to now. We don't want to create a landlocked parcel. I will say that when this was all developed, they worked very hard with our transportation division and also ODOT. There are internal routes for cross access, and they did a great job of creating a way for traffic flow to work very well through this area. But this still does not meet that roadway frontage requirement. So this was going to require platting. And again, when it was done, the other issue that happens here is that this lot would not have water or sewer. They'd have to be extended. So that causes it to have to go through a replatting process to be able to allow that to be done and to create the easements and the utilities to get to there. And also, as we discussed just a second ago, it does not have the required frontage to a public roadway. So we met with the proposed developer of this property and tried to offer some options. One option is lease that property and build lease on it. We did look, just out of curiosity, I checked what the buildable area is of this lot after you get outside of the easements. It's a little bit larger than a typical residential lot. It's 75 by 180, which is a little deeper than what we see most of our lots are, and just barely wider. So that kind of gives you an idea of the space that we're talking about as a buildable area. But again, you could lease it, and that would allow this to work under this existing plat because it's still under the ownership of one parcel, and it has the frontage onto Highway 77. Another option that could be done is to create what we call a flag lot. A flag lot gives you a way that you create that frontage, and then you can use that, and you can have you can have shared access agreements that allow you to use that area as a common drive. And just for examples of some ways that this could be accomplished with this parcel, I've got the two different options shown here. One coming right down along the property line on the north side of the parcel and continuing that out to Highway 77. Or you could go behind the existing structures to the south side and carry them down there. So there's different options. There's ways that this can be done. You don't see this a whole lot, but you do see it. And I wanted to kind of show some examples of this. This is a flag lot example that's on 24th. It's just north of Main Street. And you can see that they had a small parcel out front with a parcel remaining in the back, and they retained a flag along the south line. So this is a way that they'd be able to continue to be able to sell that property at the back and develop it, and it is developed today. Another option or another location where this has occurred, this is actually in University North Park in the corporate center area. It's actually on the north side of it, and I apologize, this projector always seems to wash out some of our graphics a little bit. But on the north side, there are actually 3 lots deep, and they all have the 2 lots behind it each have a flag that come down to the private roadway there that makes it meet that standard of having the roadway frontage. One of the interesting things here is that their site development plan actually does not even show using those areas for access, but it meets the legal requirements of having a roadway frontage. And in this case, those roadway frontages are each only 10 foot. So council allowed, we typically like to see them wider than that. If we're doing a private roadway, it'd be a 50-foot easement. If you see that a lot in the rule, but council has on these flag lots allowed a narrower width to be able to make the project work and be able to get the plating requirements. This is one that I remembered from back a little ways. It's been done for a while. But this is Fountain View North. So this is just north of Fountain View on 48th, just south of Tecumseh. These are small kind of patio homes, very nice homes. But you can see, especially if you look there to the far right, you can see those lots over there. They all have that weird little flag. And there are 3 and 4 lots deep that have access back to their driveways and their houses through these little 10-foot flags out to a public roadway. And then if you look there in the middle, you can see how it works. They have one big shared common driveway with smaller driveways and access to their garages. So flag lots are something that we see that we have seen used successfully. It's something that previous councils have approved that has been through the planning process. But I just kind of wanted to take some of these today and just show you some options, kind of discuss the reasons for why we don't allow the landlocked lots. And with that, I would really just entertain any questions. I just wanted to present this to you and give you any opportunities to ask questions that you may have.
One of the potential solutions to this that came up or was suggested at our meeting the other day was, and I saw a response from Sean about it earlier, but the short form plat. Would you mind explaining why that wouldn't work in this situation? Or
Right.
where it would work, I guess, too?
Right, so a short form plat requires that all the required utilities are available to both lots. And in this case, they're not. They're going to have to do sewer and water extensions to be able to get to this back lot. And it still does require the roadway frontage. So you'd still have to have that. In this case, you could have created a flag lot through a short form plat, but because of the extensions of the public utilities, that can't be done on this property.
And did we find any other examples around the metro where cities have allowed lots to not have legal frontage?
I have not done any specific research on that. However, their codes say that that is not allowable.
Yeah, and I did take the time to get a planner from Oklahoma City on the phone, and, not to quote them, but, I just went through the scenarios very generally, and they were very adamant, no, that's not something Oklahoma City would ever let happen. And it's the same thing, the ownership and frontage together, it's fundamental.
Are there any other ones we've come across like this? I know the backyard house issue that has been mentioned. Are there other examples of this you can recall in Norman we've come across where there were lots like this, or that somebody wanted to sell potentially but didn't want to sell the frontage? Or
It's infrequent,
Yeah.
Counselor, but it's probably not that unusual that we'll have an owner come in, someone who just bought a piece of property, many times in the rural areas. And, the county will register or record anything that comes in the door. But typically, they'll end up with us and say, well, now I want to develop this, and we'll have to say, well, you don't have legal frontage. When you bought that owner sold you a landlocked parcel. I'm sorry, but here we can help you to replat it. And that's happened a few times during my time here. So that does happen. I think it's an innocent thing. One owner, they don't understand what they're doing, but it's been very disappointing. I know working with these folks after they've gone through the whole purchase process and then find out they can't get a building permit because they don't have a legal lot. So we'd like to head those off, if we can, and we do, I think, for the most part.
Yeah, I sort of what Sean said. The only ones that I can think of are some areas where there were illegal lot sales and lot splits in the rural area that have created this. And when they come in, we have to help them find ways to rectify it, typically by doing a flag lot or extending a roadway to the lot through another adjacent property.
Councilmember Grant?
Is it possible to know what landlocked parcels we have in our city right now? Or is it just a case-by-case basis you find them?
I can't go into GIS and search for them, other than just looking visually, and then you'd have to look individually on each one, determine if there's a plat around it, pull the plat up, check the plat. So it would take an exhaustive effort to do that. But in the urban area, I don't know of any off the top of my head.
I think there was one in 4 not too long ago with some on-street parking issue that I think they had sold the back. It was like one of those weird house plots.
So McCullough, this is the example Councilman Holman was referring to, is a property, one of the new Center City redeveloped properties that end up getting sold to a developer there. In fact, a developer who does a lot of developing in that area. And it was after the fact that he realized that he had purchased a property that did not have access to the public alley in the rear because of a previous sale. And that then prompted him during his building permit in Center City form-based code process to then have to do parking and access to the front. We worked through it, but it was a challenging thing. Once again, I think he was the victim of a sale 30 years ago that the city wasn't a party to.
Yeah, and I would like to specify that it wasn't a frontage issue. It was
Yeah.
just simply because of the way the codes in that area work together. They lacked an access that the code had presumed they would have. So that's how we got there. And I would say that as far as platted parcels go, I think we are pretty confident that those aren't allowed out there without frontages. But as Sean was just saying, you can have people sell off parts of their land without necessarily going through a platting process or speaking to anyone at the city. And our codes are confusing. As Scott said, you would have to look in 3 places to really understand how they all work together. And so that can happen, and it's after the fact of a sale that we might learn that they're unable to develop or plat, and that's when we try to find a solution. But in my 5 years, I cannot remember an exception to this frontage requirement.
It's not the kind of thing you can go to the Board of Adjustment and get a variance on, or is it?
No, it's a waiver. It would be a waiver of a subdivision, and BOA really is only over the zoning ordinance itself, whereas this provision for commercial and industrial is found within Chapter 19.
One of the key points we've made in this particular discussion is this is one of those times when you have to kind of look beyond the current ownership or the current buyers. Maybe they would agree to some unusual situations, but when we do something like this, it's forever. So the next buyer, or in the case of McCullough, the buyer 40 years later is then left with a mess on their hands. So that's why I think, as Scott said, this is sort of that critical function of subdivision development, that every parcel must have legal front footage. And if we do that, things really work out well for everyone forever, not just for now.
Any other comments or questions from you two?
Was this particular owner receptive to the shared access agreement, the flag lot design that you guys presented?
Particular owner sitting behind
Yeah, I
you.
was gonna say, Mr.
And
Parker
is
is.
that, and is asked Mr. Holman if I can speak, but.
Yes, I was gonna see if they had any
Yeah,
follows,
y'all can
but,
talk with them first.
But yes, Mr. Parker, if you would like to.
Can I?
Yes, please.
And I appreciate the city staff, and for me, this is also part of process. I have been working on this deal for 13 months. 13 months with the city. For the first 5 months, I tried to meet and I tried to have discussion, and I was unequivocally told there was absolutely no way to get this deal done. I asked to meet with Mr. O'Leary, and by his staff, I was told he has already been apprised of the information and would not meet with me, and that the only way that I would get this deal done is if I got the city council to change the code. I said, thank you for your time, and I went away. And as Mr. Holman knows, being that he is in this district, he was the first council person I met with. I brought him out to the lot and showed him everything, talked to him, went through the whole different thing, because in this piece of land, which is very unique, that the cross-access agreement is a part of the plat that the city approved. And we cannot get a definitive answer from this, but from every title company that I've called, and from every lawyer that I've had to hire on this, has stated a plat cannot be changed in the city of Norman without city approval, which makes this piece of property extremely unique. And when you look out there and get there and you go through this, every person who has come out there, and I've invited city staff to come out there and talk with me, to yet no one has. I've invited city council and planning commission out, and everyone who has come out there, and you're one of them, so I don't want to speak for you, but when you look at it, so you can absolutely cut me off and object to me. When you look at it being a part of the plat, when you read the cross-access agreement, this is a unique circumstance, which city code and variances should be able to be granted in extremely unique and rare circumstances. At a certain time, every single city code that was written never has a variance. I mean, the city staff don't write codes with saying, okay, we're going to grant variances and exceptions to them. They come through over time. Just like we didn't plan on bridges to last 80 years, we didn't plan for the types of developments that there are in Southeast Norman that we're currently talking about when this city code was written. There's stoplights, there's the cross-access agreement, it is a part of the plat. And so we have said, what can we do? In the first 3 meetings I had with the city, I asked, can the 25-foot requirement be lowered? I was emphatically told by the staff, absolutely not. It's never been done. I went away through my own research and brought back to the city staff times where it had been lowered. They said, well, we'll get back with you. Then I started meeting with the city council, bringing them one by one. After the 4th one, and it was going to come to this meeting, was when we had the opportunity to meet with Mr. O'Leary and all of his staff. And we came, and now we've been dealing with that since April. And now we do have the opportunity to look at the 10-foot wide spur that we're talking about. Do I want to do that as a small business owner, as a citizen that lives in this community? No, it's going to cost me a significant amount of more money. But this whole process of the 13 months has also cost me a significant amount of time and money and effort. And this is an editorial comment, but when the city talks and wants to do bonds, the reason why a lot of them fail is because of lack of trust of citizens. I get to sit around with business owners, with community members, without anyone around, and we talk about the trust between citizens and the city. And this is a prime example. I have been dealing with this issue for 13 months to get to the exact same point that I asked to have 13 months ago. If the original thing of the 10-foot spur would have been granted and even said it's a possibility in the first meeting in September of 2020, this would never have been brought to you. Never. And that's a part of my frustration. That's a part of this costing me attorney fees, this costing me time, this costing me having to pay rent, to where 13 months ago, if I could have purchased this, my building would already be up and going. I haven't even been able to buy it yet. And that's a part that I think, as a citizen of Ward 3 who has a business in Ward 7, it's demoralizing. I don't think there are that many people, and I will say this, and I can't say this because they're not in the room, but the people who dared me to go to city council and get this changed didn't think I would do it. They had no idea that I would actually go and have 4 council members come out to the lot, have members of the planning commission come out to the lot and look at it and talk through it and try to find ways to get this done. And as a citizen, I don't think I should have to. I don't think that city government should be that hard. I don't think it should be that much of a fight. And that's my frustration with this process. I'll buy the extra 10 feet now that we've got it down to that. I'll spend the extra money. I will spend it and look at it as a cost of the business of the long-term project that I will have for 50 years. But if what we're looking at for this plan, and their part is saying guaranteeing access down the road, if the cross-access agreement is a part of the plat, and the plat has to be approved by the city of Norman, that access is guaranteed unless the city of Norman makes a mistake and grants a plat without that being there. And that's a part where, to me, the process has been more challenging than actually the code.
Appreciate that, Mr. Parker. It is, like I said, a very kind of unique situation we found ourselves in with this piece right here. And I'm glad we were able to figure out some way forward potentially here, even if though it's not ideal. And I'm sorry that it had to take this long to go through to get to this point, but I'm glad we were able to have this discussion. Specifically, if other issues like this arise in the future with other properties in Norman, we can have some of this information to look back on. I know that staff was not recommending that we alter our ordinances for this in light of other solutions that have been suggested. So for now, I think we might see how this comes along, and if we need to revisit this further at a later date, I wouldn't mind doing that. So any other comments from committee members?
I think you're spot on with that.
Okay, well, thank you very much, staff, and everyone else here in attendance. There are no more items on our agenda, so we will adjourn this meeting right now. Thank you.
Eventually, this flag law will end up in-